Wi-Fi radiation opens up your blood-brain barrier.
How does Wi-Fi radiation open up your blood-brain barrier?
Yeah, now you're going beyond my expertise.
Oh, we got to get rid of Wi-Fi. What the
I'm Dr. Stephanie Ellis Baker. I study health and wellness communication online, particularly looking at influencers and the spread and amplification of mis and disinformation. So a wicked problem is a complex problem. It's a complex policy issue that is devoid of objective standards to measure and solve it. Some examples would be climate change, poverty, or inequality. It's recognized that these are all serious social problems, yet there's a lack of consensus about how we can effectively solve them. In many ways, the COVID-19 pandemic was a wicked problem.
We have a problem that a month ago nobody ever thought about.
When many of the politicians and official institutions argued that they were science-led, all these anti-vaccine influencers needed to do was to poke holes in these official narratives and show that, in fact, they weren't as stable as they were originally purported to be.
Last week, we told you about the Disinformation Dozen. They are a group of 12 people said to be responsible for sharing 65% of all anti-vaccine messaging. One of them is another familiar name to people, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
When we were exploring how anti-vaccine discourse was spread by influencers online, what we repeatedly saw was this reference to truth, the truth.
Okay. Hate to break it to you, but the truth is not a conspiracy.
So what we saw was a resemblance between, say, 9/11 truthers and the truthers that basically rose to prominence in this anti-vaccine space, but were doing so to spread anti-vaccine discourse and then to usually either fundraise or sell products and services in this out-help space. We identified 4 techniques that they used. First, positioning against a corrupt and evil medical establishment. It was really characterized by this Manichaean struggle between light and dark, good and evil.
Turnkey totalitarianism. Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in an attic like Anne Frank did.
What's so pertinent about this is that it fits very much into this essentialist definition of a conspiracy theorist, in which you have these so-called evil elites.
All the things that humans that are happening in the world now, what politicians are doing, what the media are doing, the eternal question that arises, are they evil or malevolent, or are they just very stupid?
So-called evil elites that were really the mastermind were figures like Bill Gates and Dr. Anthony Fauci. And the problem, of course, is that at the start of the pandemic, even the most well-regarded scientists were unsure about the origins, the transmission, and effective treatments. It was problematic that then many politicians and governments used this idea about science-led because the science didn't have a consensus around it at the time, and it was still very uncertain, very much evolving. And then, of course, when things turn out to be false that were once believed, or there's new understandings, then that further generates a sense of mistrust.
Science is about questioning authority, and anybody who says, I am the science, is lying.
When you have these evil elites, people like Kennedy positioning themselves as virtuous, as good. Second is access to stigmatized knowledge. And what's really important here is this idea that these figures have privileged access to the truth. So if you look at their discourse, and particularly their newsletters that we've really looked at closely, you'll often find references to exposing the corruption, releasing hidden material, revealing the truth. It's this idea that this information is not merely hidden, it is stigmatized. And one way in which they exemplify this is through these claims about censorship.
I've never been anti-vaccine. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. I see somebody on a hiking trail carrying a little baby, and I say to them, better not get them vaccinated. Using that pejorative to describe me is a way of silencing or marginalizing me. If he hears it from 10 other people, maybe he won't do it.
And this is fundamental to all of these influencers because they claim that they are sharing this stigmatized knowledge that these institutions, experts, and elites are trying to censor from the public.
Completely abhorrent.
Use my words.
It's the witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time, and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
Third is calls to action, often framed through calls to truth, freedom, and justice. When you look at the information that these influencers are sharing, what they're really providing is this promise of a utopian vision of a better society. We have a corrupt society, but it could be better. And so what's very interesting when you look at a figure like Kennedy is that much of his discourse is shaped through this language of social justice, primarily through protecting women and children who are seen as these vulnerable groups.
The group operated with a budget of just a few $1,000s a year. But that changed when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. came on board in 2015. The group rebranded in 2018 as Children's Health Defense. It is now one of the most popular so-called alternative health sites in the world, peaking at nearly 4.7 million visits per month.
But increasingly during the pandemic, protecting marginalized racial groups.
The 8 men who are survivors of the syphilis study at Tuskegee are a living link to a time not so very long ago that many Americans would prefer not to remember.
The government and public agencies actually used Black men as guinea pigs.
There is a long history of racial injustice. And so Kennedy builds on that and then adds vaccination as part of this continuum.
It's playing Russian roulette with the rest of your child's health worth that injection in the dark.
Our body, our choice! Our body, our choice! Our body, our choice!
They are able to communicate their message through truth, freedom, and justice. These are much bigger claims that give people a sense of commitment and meaning and purpose and a reason to actually defend their movement and join their movement, right? It's a call to action. And the final self-presentation technique was this promise of leadership and guidance.
His bid to challenge Biden for the nomination is most definitely a long shot. It relies really heavily on the low-trust, paranoid environment we increasingly find ourselves in.
And the idea here is that when you have this so-called corrupt medical establishment, governments and social institutions that can't be trusted, people need alternative leaders.
You're asking Democratic voters in this room and across the country to do something that hasn't been done in 167 years in this country, to vote out a president of their own party. Not to mention, replace him with somebody who hasn't even held elective office.
And in presenting themselves as virtuous and noble and good, these influencers and anti-vaccine truthers position themselves as alternative leaders, people who can be trusted. So during the pandemic, debunking was a very popular way to critique much of the myths and disinformation that was circulating online. I think it is short-sighted. So often when you look at conspiracy theories and you really try to understand where the conspiracy theorist comes from, it is a negative experience that they have had with some type of established expert or social or government institution. It's a personal experience or it's a direct experience with somebody that somebody's very close to that is the source of their kind of deep distrust of social government institutions and established experts.
By your not being judgmental, by not telling me that it was all fake or that I was crazy, I was able to slowly climb back out because of your support.
Much debunking falls into the category of mockery, ridicule, and essentially shaming people who believe in these things. And the result tends to be just a deeper divide. Often the people who are able to see mis and disinformation for what it really is, It's not through debunking, it's not through shaming. It is often through seeing some type of hypocrisy with the people who are promoting this disinformation.